This is Katinka.
And this is Simone. And you are listening to the Novotech podcast.
Our guest in this episode is Fernanda Sassiotto, the head of engineering for market data at Iris. Today we discuss strategic thinking with Fernanda. Her top tips for becoming better at strategic thinking are the following. Develop your business and finance acumen to understand how a business operates. Strategy should be about helping you make decisions. Otherwise, you might be creating waste in terms of your resources. Use data in your decision making. Finally, a coach or a mentor can be really helpful as well. Fernanda keeps up with her physical and mental health by prioritizing what's important at the present time and matching expectations to reality, not the other way around. Her advice is to find a balance every day in what you want to prioritize when it comes to family time, working out, cooking, and working long hours. When facing failure, reflect on it and think about how you could have done things differently as a learning experience for next time. Talk to the right people and ask for feedback. Fernanda's tips for learning on the job are asking open-ended questions, watching online videos and attending digital conferences. And she has a few book recommendations as well. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. This is a continuation of our previous episode where we discussed changes to the tech industry, leadership styles, highly collaborative teams, and more. Let's get started.
Over the course of a career, you changed from technical roles to tactical and now to more strategic roles. What would be the learnings you got from it? What's the biggest change in your experience in the way someone thinks? Do you believe it can be learned? If yes, how?
I would say that my career moves were always driven by my desire to learn. So I think that's the first thing, the desire to learn and to find out more about something. And for me, the moment I start to feel really comfortable about the role that I'm in, that's when I start to get, the itch to start to look for something else to learn and something different to do. It's very interesting because it's not a conscious effort. Like I'm not always, thinking about changing jobs, but it just happens, as I start to feel a bit that I'm not pushing myself, that I'm not learning. All of a sudden I feel this need of, doing something different or doing a different role, looking for something new. I think with strategy and strategic thinking was the same thing. I remember after I took a year off to look after my son and I came back to work and all of a sudden I felt that real need to start focusing a little bit more on the big picture and to learn more about the company and to learn more about strategy and how and what are the different approaches to creating a good strategy. And so I went back to work and I think for me it was a deliberate decision to learn that. So I started talking to my manager at the time about creating learning opportunities for me to perhaps shadow him or to learn from him on how to even approach the creation of a strategy. So that was really good. So learning in the job by shadowing my manager was for me a good start. And I think, after a few months, I thought I needed a little bit more. So a role came up at work that I applied for. So a secondment position I applied for and I was successful. And this role was completely different from anything that I had done in the past. But I knew that even though it was different and even though it was a move upwards but sideways at the same time, I thought was going to be really interesting to give me exposure to different people, to the leadership group and people that could really push me to think a little bit more strategically. So I went for it. So I did that secondment for about 10 months. And in that role, I was reporting directly to the CTO at the time. And I asked him, I said, I want to learn more about strategy. What do you recommend? Can you coach me? Yeah, so he was obviously giving me a few hints and ideas and coaching me a little bit. But also he recommended some books for me to read and, some self-learning, I guess. And I guess once I felt a little bit more confident, that's when I decided maybe it's time for me to now look for a role where I can apply my learnings. And it was also very good timing that this role at RS came up at the moment, at the time when I was starting to think about, changing role to a more strategic role. So I think it was all about timing as well. And, when this role came up, that's why I decided, now it's a great time. I can jump in and this role will allow me to implement my learnings as well as continue to develop my skills, because I still feel that I'm very much in the journey of learning about strategic thinking and how to create a strategy, a vision, and the different approaches and all that. So yes, I guess another long answer to your question. I think absolutely it can be learned. And it can be learned in many different ways. I think it's a combination of traditional ways of learning, like maybe a training, books. But I think the most important for me was learning on the job from people that were already doing that, and really making the effort to ask them to coach me and really being deliberate about the choices I made as well in the roles that I went to and the people that I spoke to and the mentors and the coaches that I had.
That's really nice, amazing way of getting, but everything started basically with you, because if you haven't asked your manager, nothing would have happened. So good on you. And I wish we would have more people, like you, because it's very common for people to complain that they don't receive someone, so they put the responsibility on others. So, I didn't have the opportunity to learn, or the company didn't have the budget for learning, or whatever that might be. But yeah, I think everything starts with us going after what you want. And that's good, because your manager ended up being kind of a mentor for you.
Yeah, look, and I think that's, your comment it's very interesting and spot on. So for me, very early in my career, in a very difficult way, I would say, I learned that I'm in charge of my career, not anyone else. And if I don't go after what I want, no one else is going to, there are some nice people that you meet along the way, and they will recognize your skills and they'll see things in you that you don't even see yourself. And I was lucky enough to have a few people like that in my career. But the reality is, more often than not, you have to fend for yourself. You have to really know what you want and go for it. And it takes time to know what you want. Often, say it's a lot easier to know what you don't want than what you want. So you have to get a lot of things wrong before you really find out what is it that you want to learn and what is it that you want to do. And that's completely fine. It is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have to always think about the long term. But for me, it's always having clear in my mind what is the next thing that I want to learn. And 2 years ago, when I started this strategy journey, I really wanted to know about strategy. But then I realized that maybe I was focusing too much in strategy and too much about people leadership. And I now needed to go back to technical, because my technical skills were getting a bit outdated. So then I went and did AWS courses and different technical courses that I felt like I needed to learn more as I was moving into a role that was data related. So it's trying to balance as well the things that you want to learn, because you can't do everything all the time. So it's really finding the right opportunities and being clear in your mind what are the things that you want to learn.
And what would you recommend to someone who wants to follow a similar path? So what do they need to do to become a strategic thinker? Do you have some tips for us?
One thing that really helped me was to have access to a coach. So last year, I through working for REA, I had the opportunity to participate in a fantastic leadership program. And through this leadership program, I had access to a executive coach, and she was just fantastic. The program itself was designed for female leaders working in male-dominated industries. And I guess through the program and through the different sessions that we went through, the coach really opened my eyes on how important it is to develop my business and my finance acumen as well. So really understand about how a business operates and the financial side behind it as well. And through that course, she also taught us different strategy techniques, so different ways to develop a strategy. So I would say for those wanting to follow similar path, if you can, by all means, get a coach to help you. But if you don't have access to a coach, I think, finding mentors and finding people in the area that could really teach you, people that have experience in the area that you could benefit from, asking questions and mentoring you. I think that is just another fantastic way to learn on top of any formal learning or on the job experience.
Can you share a story with us, for example, where you apply strategic thinking on the job?
So in my role as the head of engineer and someone that's responsible for delivery, the way I see the strategy needs to be clear to help us make decisions. So within my delivery teams, for example, if they're being pulled in many different directions to work on many different things that don't align with the strategy of the company or the strategy of the area, that means waste, right? We are wasting people's time, we are wasting resource, we are wasting money. So having a clear strategy really helps us to make those hard decisions. Do I really want to work on this piece of work? Yes or no? Is this aligned to my strategy? Yes or no? And that's really plain simple. If it is aligned to my strategy, then yes, we can, let's go ahead and let's plan to work on this. You can really focus on what your teams are working on. And obviously with that, you create a lot more effective teams and in turn, potentially saving money, saving resources, and all of that.
As strategic thinkers, do you see many leaders making their decisions based on data?
That's a very good question. So the answer is, I think we should be basing our decisions on data, but my experience is that we're still not. We're still a long way away from basing our decisions on data. I think we're getting better at it. We're getting better at capturing data and really understanding what metrics do we want to measure that will give us the data that we need to make decisions. But I think we're still evolving, at least for me and, for my area and for my role, like even myself, I'm still evolving on that. So I think there's still a long way to go for leaders to start using data to then drive that strategy.
Managing big teams in your day-to-day might be tiring, requiring a lot of your energy. Is there any particular way of dealing with it? And how do you keep up with your physical and mental health?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, isn't it? I think for me, having suffered from anxiety and, like mental health issues is a big problem for me because I suffered from mental health issues in the past. So I really, really need to prioritize that on my day-to-day. And it's really tough because, who doesn't want to do everything? I want to do everything. I want to be the perfect mom. I want to be the best at my work. I want to have the perfect house and, eat just, clean and healthy food. And and exercise every day. I want to do all that, but like to me, at least to me, it's impossible. So what works for me, what's working for me right now, I have to say, is that I have to lower my expectations of the number of things that I can get done in one day. So if I know that I'm going to have a long day at work, then perhaps, we are ordering dinner that night. For me, it's about having a good supporting network as well, with my husband taking, very much 50% of the responsibilities with my son and with the house, and maybe even more than that with cooking, because he does most of the cooking in the house. But there are things that I prioritize and that I've been prioritizing at the moment, and they'll change with time. It's not always the same. So, for example, being active and exercising is one of them. Try and move a little bit, at least 3 times a week, and having enough sleep. So sleep's really important to me, and really understanding that I can't do everything every day, and really trying to find that balance. So some days I'll work for longer hours, but maybe the next day I work less. So for example, at the moment, my son doesn't go to daycare on Wednesdays. So in the mornings, I spend my day with him, but then I work until, a little bit later on Wednesdays, so I can get my work done. So it's really like finding flexible in different ways. I think the whole 9 to 5 doesn't exist anymore. I think we are all connected with our computers and phones. So we are always on. So it's really making a deliberate effort to switch off, not spending time in the computer or on the phone before bed, having 8 hours sleep. These are my priorities. I have to sleep. And do like outsourcing when we can, ordering food and outsourcing things that we can. So it's, every day it's really looking at finding that balance.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point you make there, because it's the whole continuous learning and adapting process that we need to look and say, okay, if that's not working anymore, change. And then as you do this daily or weekly, the changes won't be that big. So for you to adapt, or people around you to adapt, will be much easier as well. So yeah, great strategy.
So I would like to ask you, how do you deal with failure?
That's a good question, and that's something that I'm still learning and getting better every day. But the way I've been trying to approach it, and the way I try to see it, is that when I fail, it's usually an opportunity to learn something new. So I guess this is really hard for me, because I tend to beat myself up quite a lot when things don't go my way. And for me, it's really trying to shift that way of thinking, to not blaming myself, not, being frustrated or upset at myself, to look at it as an opportunity to learn and to think about how I could have done it differently. And then maybe, next time it happens, then I will have another thing in my toolkit to learn how to deal with that situation. So yeah, for me, I'm still in the journey, but I think it's really trying to use that as an experience to get better at something, to learn, and then to maybe next time I face a similar challenge, then I'll have better tools to deal with it.
So how does this process look like for you? Do you have an approach, or do you follow certain techniques?
So I'm not sure if I would say I have any techniques per se, but I think it's more about self-reflection and really being conscious about what's going on in my head. And, if I I will, focus on the negative, and I will spiral out of control. But it's really trying to remove myself from that way of thinking and consciously being more positive, do a lot of reflection to say, how could I have approached that same situation in a different way? If I had done that, how, what would be the impact? But also talking to people as well. I think, feedback is really important. And feedback is something that I learned to appreciate a lot more with time. It was very difficult in the beginning of my career, especially constructive feedback. I was never ready to receive it. And I find that today I'm a lot more open to constructive feedback and to really look for advice from people that are not as involved in the situation on how I could have done things differently. So really asking people for feedback and for the input. So yeah, this is usually how I try to deal with it.
Thanks for sharing these tips, because I think it's a lot of us these days, we suffer from anxiety and we always try to be really perfect, and we end up, just seeing things almost as failure, but in the end they're just lessons. I think self-reflection is a really, really good idea, or a good tip here.
Yeah, sure. I think someone other day said that's just a new opportunity for you to learn something and become even better.
Good. Exactly. Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question. You've mentioned earlier learning is really important for you, right? So what do you want to learn next? And also, each person might have different approaches to learning. Are there any techniques or anything that make learning quicker or better, in your opinion?
So I've recently started a new job. So as I said, I started at Ares in September, and all my focus and attention at the moment is dedicated to learning about Ares, learning about market data, learning about the stock market, and learning about Ares as a business and how it operates. So in terms of what I want to learn next, I feel like I have such a steep learning curve that I still have to climb. It will take me a while to get there because it's such a different world for me. I have no finance industry background. So I'm focusing all my time in learning everything I can about how to do my job well. And how to and learn about the company that I'm working for. And for me, the way I'm doing that, the way I'm approaching that is obviously learning from my peers and my team members and really asking a lot of questions, asking a lot of open-ended questions, and all the questions that you think are very basic, are very, like, I would think maybe I'll ask, I have permission, I'm new, I have permission to ask the most basic questions in a very open-ended way. So that to me, that's a good learning technique. And watching videos, reading documentation. And so that's what's working for me at the moment in terms of learning about Ares and stock market and market data. The other things that work for me, and I guess it's a suggestion, is audiobooks. I really, really like audiobooks, and I find not so much now because of COVID, because we're all still working from home. But before that, in the car, when I was commuting to work or on the tram, or even when I was going for a walk, I find it really easy to put a book on my phone and just listen to it. And that's how I got through a lot of, leadership books, for example, during my commuting hours. And, obviously reading documents, articles, there's a lot of great stuff on the internet. So you just have to start searching for it. But I think for me, mostly what works is also learning in the job and learning from people in the job and within my area, finding someone that I can trust and that I can have one-on-one catch-up. So at the moment at Ares, I'm having so many one-on-one catch-ups weekly with different people so that I can get to ask my questions. And then when I finish that catch up, I have to take some time to consolidate the learning in my head as well, and then formulate follow-up questions for my next session. So it's really like, for me, what works is to take a very structured approach to learning. So if you have a mentor and a coach, really think about how to make the most of that hour or hour and a half that you spend with that person by coming in prepared and having a plan of attack. What are the questions you want to ask? What do you want to know more about? So yeah, in terms of recommendation for people and the best way to learn, I would say take advantage of audiobooks or podcasts or things that you can do on the go, because we are all short in time. And when you actually have time to focus, look at articles and videos, conferences. Like, it's great that everything is online now, and you can find so many great conferences and so many great content. I think that's one of the good things about COVID as well, that you have all this material available online. And the last one is about finding the right people to mentor you. But when you do, really appreciate that time together and really have a structured approach to the conversation.
Yeah, so you mentioned audiobooks. So do you have any books in general that you would recommend to our listeners?
There is a book that I've been talking about a lot lately. I think my work colleagues are very annoyed at me because every conversation I bring up this book. It's called Topologies by Manuel Pais and Matthew Skelton. And it's all about how to organize teams in your organization to increase flow. So for me, that's really relevant at the moment, because I have 6 teams that work in my area. So really, it's just a great book with lots of tips on how to best organize your teams to improve flow. And the other one that I love, it's by Brené Brown. Like, I really love Brené Brown. Like, she's just a fantastic author on leadership books. So she has a book that I read recently called Dare to Lead. And it's a book where she explores different leadership traits, such as vulnerability and empathy. And I just think it's a fantastic book for everyone, aspiring to be in leadership positions. And really powerful book. I really recommend it.
Yes, it's always good to be learning, and we are always learning something. And even when you think, oh, might not be the case, which was not today, but yeah, thank you.
And finally, Fernanda, how can people connect with you?
I think the best way to connect with me would be through LinkedIn. So I think Simone and Katinka, you probably put my LinkedIn profile in the notes for the podcast. So yes, feel free to reach out, and I will be more than happy to connect with like-minded people, and happy to continue the discussion offline.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us today about strategy, mental health, and more. And I really enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Simone and Katinka. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Let us know what you liked and didn't like about the 2-part conversation with Fernanda. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.